Well, hello everybody. Down and Out Dave here again, hanging out in this lovely alleyway along with this trash. It's really great. Today I was walking around out on the streets of this lovely city where I panhandle and scrounge for food and try to survive, and I came across this. There Will Be Blood. Daniel Day-Lewis. One of my most favorite movies and favorite actors. Daniel Day-Lewis is what you would call a real artist. He's not one of those celebrities that you see on Twitter or trying to sell you some weird product. This guy is all about his acting craft. When he's not making a movie, I don't even know where the hell he is. I've heard that people say that he makes shoes when he's not making a movie. But walking around and finding this really brought back a lot of memories of my younger days when I wasn't homeless. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, because people have talked this movie to death, but one of the things that people haven't talked about is, where did Daniel Plainview come from? Now in the movie, it talks a little bit about back east, Fond du Lac, a little bit about his family. But what I think is really interesting is to do a deep psychological dive into who is Daniel Plainview. And I think if you pay attention to the movie, to some of the subtle details, you kind of get a lot of his backstory. So the movie starts out, which is it's famous for, is for the first 20 or so minutes, there's no talking. We see Daniel, I believe the year is 1898. He's in New Mexico in a beautiful, stark landscape alone. And he's a miner. He's a silver miner. A lot of people I've heard say gold, but if you pay attention to the ledger he signs, it's silver. And he's in this place trying to strike it rich. But what I really think is funny is it kind of, shows who he is as a person. We find out later on where he's talking to the man who he thinks is his brother that he doesn't like people. He wants to make enough money so he can get away from people. But why is that? We know that he left his hometown and went west, like a lot of young men did back during those days, to search and make their fortune. So it's kind of like he's an introvert and maybe he doesn't trust people, which I think is a big part of it. So he mines, finds some silver, is injured. The way he deals with his injury, even after falling and breaking his leg, after he tries to crawl down in the mine, after he sets off the dynamite, even injured, the first thing that he does is to see if the silver's there. So that shows that he puts his passions to be rich above even his own health. And then him having to crawl through the desert to get back to the city and laying there with his leg strapped up, broken, he wants to get his money. So it shows us that he is very driven, very strong, and this is the scene. He lays there because he wants to make sure he gets his money. And then we see he goes from looking for shiny metals in the ground to black gold. And he mines. And he no longer mines, and he's now drilling for oil. And he strikes oil. But he's willing to get down in there and do the dirty work. And in the process of doing that dirty work, the rig breaks, falls down, killing one of the men and almost killing himself. And for some reason, he takes it upon himself to now take care of the bastard in the basket. And in a lot of ways, we see throughout the movie that, and especially when H.W. grows up, the bastard in the basket grows up, that he was just using this cute face to be able to buy land. But I don't think that's true. I think that when he tells his grown-up son that, it's not because he truly believes it, but it's because he feels injured by his son wanting to go off and start his own business and become his competitor. And I think that he uses what he says to him as a defense mechanism to try to hurt him the way he feels hurt. But we'll look at that further later on. So we see that he's a very driven man, that he's conniving, that he looks at other people as if they're stupid or superstitious. He also seems to come across as asexual. When he's asked and questioned about his, fake son's mother, he just dismisses it. She died in childbirth. But we never see him ever trying to hook up with a woman or anything. He's driven. And even later on in the movie, when his brother and him, after they've, mapped out the pipeline and they're at the ocean swimming, and his brother, the man who he thinks is his brother, says, let's go to, eat and let's get some women. And then he says, take him to the Peachtree Festival. And that's when he learns, in his own mind, that the man isn't his brother. He picks up on some knowledge. But I think that point also, that at that point in the movie, it also shows his innocence, because Daniel isn't looking just to have sex with women, to pick up prostitutes like the man who he thinks is his brother wants to do. He's innocent. Let's take him to the Peachtree Festival. He's looking at a time when he was a younger man, and it was more about courting and about being a gentleman in a way. That's the way it comes across to me. And you can see, like, when they are picking up the women at the place, Daniel is not interested at all. His brother comes to him drunk, asking for money. You can hear laughing of a woman in the background. Daniel is asexual. It's like he doesn't care about sex. So that makes me wonder, what happened to Daniel? We find out that, when the man who he thinks is his brother first comes to his camp, that he says, I'm your brother from another mother. So right there it goes to show that his father was maybe a serial fornicator, a cheater, maybe abusive. It's one of the reasons why the family separated and the brothers went west looking for their fortunes. And, we know that, he has a sister that his supposed brother mentions that he wrote letters to. And, even says that their father's dead. And Daniel doesn't seem like he cares about that. So I wondered if maybe Daniel's father was abusive, maybe physically, maybe sexually, maybe he drank, because we see throughout the movie that Daniel's a big drinker, and he seems to just pass out anywhere, on the floor, it doesn't matter. He's just out. And he always looks, throughout the movie, he always looks so uncomfortable lying on the floor. It looks just like he's in pain almost. And one of the things I think is maybe his father was this drunkard and this serial fornicator, and maybe his mother, who is not mentioned at all, maybe she was religious and she overlooked his father's sins and faults because of her religious upbringing, and that's what she clung to. And that's why Daniel hates religion so much. You know, I would say in the movie that he's an atheist, that he despises religion, and we see that with the way that he and Paul Dano's character, you know, their confrontation, how they bump heads, that he looks on religion as, you know, for superstitious idiots. So when he goes to the Sunday ranch, he goes there, he finds these, you know, sheep farmers and tricks them, and he says, you know, he uses their ignorance. You know, he says that, you know, we're going to bring water and food, and, you know, nobody should have to suffer for, you know, have to want for just some bread and stuff like that. And he comes across like he's a messiah, but really, you know, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think that's funny when he goes to the Sunday ranch. It's called the Sunday Ranch, and they're sheep farmers, sheep and goats, you know, which is something biblical as well. And, you know, he cannot stand the preacher, Eli, and he hates religion. And one of the things also that kind of leads me to where I say there might have been physical or sexual abuse is because when they build the rig and they christen it, you know, Mary's rig for the little blonde girl that his son eventually marries, the son talks to his father and tells him about how he, you know, the little girl is beaten by her father if she doesn't pray. And the way that Daniel, you know, when they're having their little dinner, you know, the little girl is given a dress, a white dress, which shows her purity. And that's, you know, Daniel bought the dress for her, and he asks her if she likes it, and tells her, you know, talks for a minute and then sends her on her way. And, you know, it shows that the little girl is pure. That's what the white represents. And then he looks at the father because he hates him and he thinks he's superstitious fool, and he's glad that he's taken advantage of his family. And, you know, he asks the little girl if she's happy that he's came, and she says yes. And he wants to protect her, I think, in a way that he wasn't protected. And when he looks at the father in the anger and the father looks away, he turns to the alcohol and he turns up the bottle and drinks. And then when we get to where the well explodes and catches on fire, I think that represents a lot of Daniel's emotions, that he's like the rig, you know, doing its job, making money. But at any moment he can explode and burst into flames and be destroyed. And he is destroyed in that moment when his son is deafened by the explosion that happens. And he loves his son, but he's too focused on making his own money, becoming rich so that he could finally have the life that he always dreamed of, being rich enough that he don't have to be around people. So he sends his son away. But the reason why I say that I really do believe he loves his son is when he goes to the church and Eli gets him on his knees and Eli gets his revenge and he starts slapping him in the face and he starts saying that he abandoned his child. When Plainview, Daniel Day-Lewis, that look that he gives him is it's a murderous look. And that's some foreshadowing there. And he says, I abandoned my child, I abandoned my child. I think in that one moment, he does show that he loves his son. Because right after that is what he sends for his son, and his son's come back, and his son's angry and punches him, but they eventually reconcile. And also, I think one of the things that shows that Daniel he really wants love is because he's happy to have his brother. He's happy to have his brother. And I think also that he wants love above everything else. Now, he says he wants money, but he really wants love, because when he has a chance to make the deal with Standard, and the guy says from Standard, I'll make you a millionaire today, and you can take care of your son, it's like he don't care about the money. He cares, it's like he's insulted because he said something about his son. And he likes to pretend that he wants money and power, but really he just wants love. And I think that's why, it goes back to the fire when he finds out that the man isn't his brother and it kills him. He is like the oil rig because he explodes and kills the man. And then when he kills him, it really shows his character, because he's sitting there and he's reading through the letters and he's reading his true brother's words and how he circled, I want to go find my brother, and he circled it. And Daniel alone, his emotions come out and he begins to weep. Because I think in a lot of ways he wanted a family. And the reason why he says he hates people is because the people that he loved the most have always lied to him and abandoned him. And I think that's what he fears the most. So time passes. He becomes rich, everything that he wants. His son grows up and marries Mary. And now he's in his big mansion. And he doesn't care about that, because the next scene we see is him shooting bullet holes in his walls and drinking constantly. And then his son comes to him, and like everybody else in his life, breaks his heart. And he lashes out at him and says, you're just a bastard in a basket. You're my competitor. But what's funny about it is, because his son is deaf, when his son finally decides to leave and he keeps yelling, bastard in a basket, bastard in a basket, his outburst falls on deaf ears. So again, he's left alone in his own darkness. And he's got all this wealth. And then Eli comes back. And he's passed out. I always say he's uncomfortable. It looks uncomfortable laying there on the bowling alley. And Eli comes in. And this is where I think Daniel finally gets to his revenge on, of course, Eli for what he did, but also on maybe some of the superstitions that he was brought up with. And he gets Eli to admit that it's a superstition. And Eli begins to cry, and he talks about, the sins that he's done. So to me, even though he doesn't go into detail, Daniel, in a lot of ways, is pure. He's asexual. So for all we know, he's a virgin. He hurts himself, And he only hurts other people because he feels betrayed by them, because they use him. The man that pretended to be his brother used him. His son abandons him. And even though he has all the wealth in the world, he's alone and empty. So now all he has left is his degradation. And I think in that scene, we see where he drinks the big, Eli makes him drinks, and he doesn't care, and he drinks his bottle, and it's probably meant to be vodka or whiskey or something, but he just drinks it like it's water. So he's pretty much just killing himself. He just wants to kill himself. And so it's kind of a role reversal. Eli, who seemed to be like the true believer, the Christian, got taken advantage of by this oil man. He's the evil one, because he was just about power and money, because that's what he always wanted. And then when he went out into the real world, he probably, put his money in the stock market, because that's something he says about there was God didn't alert me to the recent problems in our stock market, which he's talking about the stock market crash in 1929. And he probably was out there drinking and fornicating and doing all that because, here it is early in the morning, and the first thing that he makes for him and Daniel is drinks. So he's become an alcoholic now, and drugging and women and all that. So this religious man has now become the bad guy. And Daniel, who has been betrayed by everybody, he's kind of the good guy. And, he hurts himself really more than he hurt anybody, because the only person that he kills, throughout the whole movie is the man who lied to him and who possibly killed his brother. He says that he died of tuberculosis, but he may have killed him and stole his story because he knew Daniel Plainview was rich. So it's pretty much he killed this man because he killed his brother. So, as much as, the movie tries to play that Daniel is the bad guy, Daniel is actually the good guy. And There Will Be Blood, I think, is a great title, because I think it has two meanings. It has two meanings that there'll be blood, of course people will die. But I think it also, because that's what Daniel was looking for. He was looking for connection. He was looking for blood. He was looking for his family. And I think we had glimpses of it, but he achieved wealth, but he had never achieved love and a family. And, he gets Eli to admit that religion is a superstition, and then he attacks and kills him. And I think the final line, when the butler comes in and Daniel's sitting there on the floor and Eli is laying there with blood everywhere, and Daniel turns to him and says, "I'm finished." I think that, what he's saying there is, he's ready to die because everything is lost. But he finally defeated, the enemy in his life, which may have been God, because he killed God's false representative on the earth. Because, all he wanted to do was, be successful. And he was a cold businessman. But, in a lot of ways, he was a victim himself. So, I love this movie. There Will Be Blood. Daniel Day-Lewis. There's a reason he won the Oscar. This man is a genius. So, I enjoyed talking with you guys. I hope hope you enjoyed this episode. There's movies out there that I like that I would like to look at. Not just, I know with Seven we talked a lot about just the movie itself, but I want to get deeper and look at more, deeper meanings behind movies. And I look at movies as the way I look at books. Even though they may be fiction, they're stories of humanity, of man. And I think in 10,000 years, if the planet is still here and we're all gone, maybe some different species will find our stories and we'll live forever. Who knows? But this is Down and Out Dave with We'll Talk Movies for Food. Have a great one. I gotta go find a cardboard box to see if I can get some sleep tonight. Take it easy.